Hi, Dr. Felcher. Mario texted me and asked if he could record. Oh, good, you are. Okay. Because he said he has a migraine, so he won't be in class today.
Thank you for letting me know. Oh, I'm sorry for him. I hope that clears up quickly. Ugh, no fun. No fun. All right. Well, Dee Dee's doing a nice job of showing her instrument. Yay. We are going to use instruments today. We're also going to be doing some things straight out of the book. And a lot of it is going to be me taking exercises from the book and then just doing them with you all. So you don't have to have your book open in front of you, but you might want to. It might be helpful to have your book close by. There might be a couple times that I reference a page number or just pointing out to you where we are. So if you're able to have your instrument nearby, possibly have your book nearby. And what we're actually going to talk about first is a few minutes on the budget project and budgets in general. So I'll give you just a minute to get yourself settled with any of that you might want in front of you. And then in literally just a minute or so, we'll jump into talking a little bit about budgets. I think we've got most of us here too, which is great. There's Amanda, or Amanda's chair at the moment. There's Dee Dee and Lucas. Yay, good to see you, Lucas. And Melody and Dominique and Allison and Katie. No Katie yet. Hopefully Katie's on her way. Mario has a migraine. Audrey and Gabe. Alrighty, hopefully you're all relatively settled. And as I said, let's talk first about the budget project. And I am still wrapping up final grades on those budget projects and getting all of those in Canvas, which I should mention, I am still behind on some grades, but I did get a decent chunk of them in over spring break. I highly encourage, in fact, I beg and ask you to look over those grades. If there are any mistakes that I made, if there are any grades where I had told you could have an extension and I forgot to mark it or anything like that, please go check out those grades. And I encourage you in all your spare time, right? But even the grades that you got 100 on, if you got 100%, still go open up the rubric and see if I wrote anything. Sometimes if you asked a question, I answered it in the rubric, or I gave you, a little more food for thought or something like that in the rubric. So I encourage you, even when you got 100 on something, take 2 seconds, open up the rubric and just see if I added anything in there. And good morning, Katie. Glad you're here. All right, so let me pull up real quick. I just want to put in front of you that list of things, although you might remember it very well, that you had to include in the budget project so that it's in front of you here for a second. What? Nope, not print. Get bigger. There we go. Was there anything particular as you worked on this project that was surprising to you? Were there any expenses that were more or less than you expected they were going to be? And I'm just, as I said, bringing that up just to kind of remind you what all you had to look at for this project. Anything that was surprising? Yeah, Dee Dee.
Maybe I I don't know. I bought the same violin strings as I usually buy for my cello, but they were so cheap. They were like $30 and cello strings are like $150. So I was pretty shocked. I just thought that they were all that expensive, but I guess length matters in the price.
Yes, I don't know if Melody or Allison might say the reverse, that like they went to pull up cello and bass strings and went, oh my gosh, right? Yeah, it is shocking for sure. Katie.
Yeah, I actually thought that they were more expensive than I expected them to be because guitar strings they're like $20. My brother plays guitar, so I know a little bit about that, but I was kind of surprised by how expensive they were.
Yes, my husband did the same thing because he plays guitar. And like the first time he actually saw me buy viola strings, or I talked with him about buying viola strings, he was like, wait, they're how much money? Is the same thing, that a set of 6 guitar strings is so much cheaper than a set of 4, viola or violin strings, even not even considering cello or bass. Yeah, Amanda.
Sorry, hit the wrong button. I thought it was really interesting that base rosin was maybe considerably more expensive than the violin, viola, and cello. And I was wondering why that is.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, am I okay to stop screen sharing? Raise your hand if you would like me to keep screen sharing. Anybody want me to keep? Okay, we'll get rid of that. There we go. Okay. That's a great question, Amanda. Anybody have a guess why base rosin might be more expensive? Yeah, Dee Dee.
So this might also be, I'm really bad at taking care of my base rosin, but I feel like it doesn't last as long because it's so soft that it like melts and like does weird things and like the paper gets stuck on it. Like again, I probably just did a bad job taking care of it, but
Katie, go for it.
maybe that's why.
Well, I was actually gonna say that I think you might be right because when I was looking for base rosin when I was shopping, I read like from I think it was like the Pops page or whatever that they order, or somebody who sells that brand, they have to order it in really small batches and really frequently because of that. So I think that's why.
Yeah. Oh, and sorry, I just caught that. Oh, that Katie had added to the chat. Alrighty. Good. Yeah. That can be a piece of it, which when you think of it that way, the whole supply demand thing, if you have to buy base rosin more often, you would hope that it was less expensive, right? But of course it doesn't work that way. Anybody else theories before I toss in 1 or 2 more? Oh. One is anything base is more expensive. That's one of those almost exactly, Katie. That's one of those almost marketing things, right? That is sometimes I think it's valid. I mean, bass strings are thicker, bigger, there is more material needed there. So there's at least some concept of why this might be more expensive, right? Rosin, yes, bass rosin tends to come in a larger chunk than violin, viola, cello rosin. So that could be part of it, that there is more of it. I do think some of it is just the fact that it is marketed for basses. And so there's a little bit of a markup that just kind of comes with that. Also, speaking supply demand, there are fewer basses in the world than violins, violas. So for them to make more money off of that base rosin, it has to be more expensive because they're not going to sell as much of it. Although, as you all brought up, sometimes you have to buy it more frequently. And base rosin is, and hopefully you remember this from String Tech, maybe not, base rosin is significantly stickier than violin, viola, cello rosin. It is a very different composition of rosin and goes through a very different process when it's being made. So I think that's probably also, not being someone who actually does that process, but I think that's probably part of it too, is it does have to go through different steps to become the rosin that it is compared to the other instruments. Okay. Good observations there. Anything else that was surprising as you worked on your budget? Yeah, Katie.
I think personally, because you gave us so much money, I found myself not really knowing what to do with all of it. And I know that that's a nice problem to have, but I also know that it's not very likely to be the case in our first few years of teaching. So,
yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I tried to say that right at the beginning of the project, that this is, for most districts, this is a huge amount of money, right? And it all depends on the district and can sometimes even just depend on the school. But that for most places, that's a really big amount of money. And I did that intentionally because I wanted it to be more about you discovering what the cost of things are than worrying about every single little penny and how to fit it all in. Yeah, Katie.
so that actually makes me think of another question. When you have that much money, the first question, when you have that much money, what would you, um, what's like a good go-to to spend it on? Like if you had to choose from the list of the things you provided as like extras for us, and B, what do you prioritize when you don't have that much money?
Yeah, great questions. Anybody have thoughts before I offer mine? Yeah, Amanda.
I think it's almost strictly circumstantial because it depends on what your program needs. If you really need another violin, then you need to prioritize buying a violin. But I think in general, I think it's the smaller things like you're going to buy rosin every single year. So you need to make sure that you put that into your budget. You got to make sure that you have money for strings. Just like the maintenance things need to be taken care of before taking care of other stuff. But if you really just need an instrument, then maybe trying to fit that in there.
Good. I think Dee Dee, did you have something also? Or no?
Uh, yeah, I was just kind of thinking like generally, like I would put money towards like instrument maintenance before getting new instruments. So like if you don't have enough spaces on the like cello stand or cello lockers or bass stand to like keep all of those in a safe spot, then like if I had a lot of extra money, I would prioritize that first so that the instruments that we have, even if they're not great, could at least maybe last a little bit longer. And then yeah.
Yeah, good, excellent thoughts. And Amanda hit it right on the head, of course, that it's so contextual, right? It all depends on what your teaching situation is, which you all know that's like my answer to everything, right? That you hate it, but it depends. Right? I have prioritized instrument needs over like buying music, but that's because I've been in situations where I've been really fortunate to have large music libraries or folks nearby that I could borrow music from easily. If you're in a situation where you have a really small music library or a really out of date music library, I encourage you to prioritize some of that music first, some of that repertoire, because if you don't have stuff that your students want to play, they're not going to come back. Right? They're not going to keep registering for your class. So make sure that you've got rep that is interesting to them and motivating to them. And yes, that they're also going to learn from, right? But make sure that you've got a decent library going. And then in conjunction with that, all of the instrument things that came up. As Amanda said, you're going to need rosin and strings every year. And then beyond that, it really depends, it depends again on the program and whether you provide the majority of instruments or whether your students tend to rent their own instruments. If they're renting their own instruments, very often they take care of the majority of the maintenance stuff and the things that are issues. But if the instrument inventory is mostly yours that you rent out to your students, then you're going to have more of that maintenance and those repairs and things like that to think about. Dee Dee, let me say one thing before I forget it, and then I promise I'll go to you. And many districts, violins and violas tend to rent instruments on their own. Cellos and basses will sometimes rent their own instrument, but the teacher almost always has an inventory of cellos and basses at the school because it's so hard for the students to take those instruments back and forth, right? And some districts won't even let them take those instruments on the bus because they're so big. Excuse me. So almost every orchestra teacher I know has to maintain an inventory of cellos and basses, regardless of violins and violas. And those instruments, we often have them in our room for so long, we forget that maybe they need new strings. You know, it's not just when the string breaks, but it's when the string gets old and starts to be false and not actually ring at a true pitch. So those strings need to be changed occasionally. And some things like that. And we will get a little more into that a little later in the semester when we talk about some instrument repair stuff. But yeah, so thinking about those cello and bass repairs and maintenance, as Dee Dee was mentioning. And then Dee Dee, what else were you going to say?
I was just wondering, when you do rent instruments out to the students, like would you charge them a little bit of money like for the rental, or would you just give it to them and say like this is going to be the fee for every day that you turn it in late, and this is the fee that you have to pay for the whole instrument if you never turn it in, like, or would you make them pay the school every like month or something?
You can do any of the above, of course, right? And it may depend on your school's policies. Your school might have, or your district might have a policy on how that instrument rental stuff is handled. For string project right now, where almost every student is on our inventory, I have them pay $20 a semester, right? It's very small because most of them can't afford to rent an instrument, and that's why they're using mine. But it's just enough to get them to recognize this is an important thing that you need to pay attention to. There is literal value in this instrument, and I need you to be aware of that. And they also sign a contract saying that they're going to take care of it, and if XYZ things happen, they have to take care of the repairs and some of those kind of things. When I was teaching high school, I didn't have to worry about violins and violas. They were all rented on their own. My cellos and basses who used instruments at school, I had them sign a contract, but I did not have them pay anything for that, because many of them had their own instrument at home that they were already paying for to rent. And so I didn't charge them anything for their instrument at school, but I did have them sign a contract saying, you are using this instrument regularly, take care of it, that kind of thing. So I think whatever combination of those things, given your community's financial abilities, and also your financial abilities, if you need a little bit of income for your program, it's 100% valid to charge your students a little bit each semester to use those instruments and say it's a maintenance fee. It's that I'm going to have to replace strings. It's that you're going to drop your rosin and break it. All of those type of things. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. Awesome thoughts and questions, folks. Katie, did we kind of answer your priorities question there? Cool. Anything else? I think that was most of the things I was hoping to circle back to. Yeah, like any budget in life, and Katie just got us to this, like any budget in life, it's all about setting priorities. So what the priorities are for your program, and then how much money you have, and how you want to prioritize your needs within that. The one other thing I wanted to mention to y'all, and then if you have any other questions, making sure you think about big purchases, right? If you need to buy a bass, you may or may not have the budget to do that in 1 year. Or if you buy a bass, you may not have money for anything else, right? Or depending on what repairs you need, you might blow your entire budget on those repairs and then not be able to do anything else. So when you have large expenses that you have immediately or that you can see coming on the horizon, please make sure you've talked with your financial administrator or whoever it is at your school that manages the budget and your money, and think about, how can I make this happen? Many districts will give you a budget for the year, and if you don't spend it, that money is gone. And so if you're hoping to take a little chunk of the budget and save it so that next year you can handle the really large expense or something like that, make sure you've talked with someone to make sure that a savings account type situation can actually exist. And most districts that I have encountered are willing to have that conversation with you. If you show the forethought of, I know I have this really large expense coming, how can I plan for that and save some of my budget? They will help you figure out a way to do it. But please don't assume that you can just save money to be used next year, because often they won't let that happen unless you've set it up ahead of time. And then the other thing on top of all of this, right, are booster organizations. If you have a booster organization and they have a separate financial account, that might be a little bit of extra money, or you consider it kind of a slush fund that you might have easier access to than your money through the district. So sometimes that can also help bridge the gap with those large purchases and things like that. Okay. Budgets are hard because, again, they're so contextual. They're different in every district, and how they are managed and handled is different in every district. But you should have a budget. You need to be able to buy music. You need to be able to repair instruments, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that you talk with either other teachers in your district, or of course your administrators once you've got your job, and figure out, how is my budget going to work? How do I know how to navigate all of that? And who do I go to for help with all of that? Any questions I can attempt to answer? Amanda?
So how do you account for like going to contest and having to pay fees for that and having to pay for buses? Does that come from this, or can you, I don't know, I guess that wasn't like included in the project. So I wanted to like address that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and so important, right? Because that can be a huge part of certain programs' budgets. That typically is considered a field trip. right? And so again, your district will probably have policies on whether you can charge students a fee for their field trip or not. What I did when we went to contest was I charged every student, I think it was $10. It was very minimal. I kept it as low as I could, but basically whatever I needed, the bare minimum I needed to charge to cover the expense of the bus. So if every kid paid $10 or maybe it was 15, and if anybody had financial hardship, we talked about it and I found another solution, right? But the majority of my students, I was very lucky, were able to pay that 10 or $15 for the field trip fee. And then that was what I used to pay for the buses and the bus drivers. Again, you might be able to use budget money like this to cover things. You know, if your school says you get $5,000 for the year or whatever, or if you're super lucky and get 7,500, right? I think that's what I gave you. Then maybe you can take a chunk of that and save it so that you don't have to charge your students anything. Or again, maybe your boosters. If your boosters have done some fundraising and they have some money set aside, maybe that can help pay for it and you don't have to charge your students anything. So I've seen all different combinations of kind of those options. But that's a really good point, Amanda, considering that in your budget of how can I pay for these contests and field trips of whatever nature, hopefully without putting too much strain on my students. Good. Other questions? Cool. I hope that was helpful to force you to go through string stuff a little bit and just see how much our stuff costs. Because particularly those of you in the band world have probably never looked up violin strings, right? To see how much they cost. So now you at least have some idea, even though there's so much range, but at least you have some idea there. Before we grab instruments, I just want to check in if any of you have come up with questions about your scores that you're studying, the lesson plans you're writing based on that score. Any questions that have come up that I can try to answer today on your scores? Nothing so far. All right, well, if anything comes back to mind, maybe you can hang around for a second after class and ask me then. So Wednesday, we will have asynchronous class, and I have a couple things for you to work on Wednesday, and those will be up on Canvas for you today. I promise. I'm sorry they're not there yet, but they will be there for you today to work on throughout the week. And then next week, Monday and Wednesday are our presentation days for that score project and that lesson plan project. So as we kind of, as I muddled through with Dee Dee a little bit last week, if you can plan approximately 5 minutes of you talking about your lesson plan, I'm not going to set a real specific timer, but if you start going to, 8 minutes or so, I will jump in and cut you off. So plan roughly 5 minutes, less is fine, of you talking through your lesson plan and what your goals, objectives are, and the activities that you would do in that lesson. And then we'll have a few minutes after that for classmates and me to ask you any follow-up questions that we want to, and then we will move on to the next person. We got to be under 10 minutes to be able to get through everybody that needs to talk. So that'll be one of my benchmarks there. Any questions about that for next week, Monday, Wednesday, what you need to present? Cool. Obviously, I'd like you to have your lesson plan, well formed and be ready to talk about it and all those kind of things. But I don't want it to feel like too formal or scary of a presentation. I'm hoping it's just kind of, hey, let's chat about this lesson plan and hear what your thoughts and ideas were on that lesson plan. So I hope you're not feeling too much pressure or stress around the presentation part, but please let me know if you are, and I'll see what I can do to lessen it. Dee Dee, is that a question?
Should we dress nice or can we just dress normal?
You can dress normal. Great question. Okay. No need to dress up. Hoodies are welcome. Excellent question. All right. Any other questions at the moment about assignments and coursework stuff before we move into playing for the rest of class? Cool. Well, if you can get your instrument, and like I said, you might want your book nearby, but you don't have to have it. You just might find it helpful to glance at. And I will play some tuning notes for you in just a second. Let me double check my A first before I play it for you. All right, as usual, feel free to use a tuner on your own in the background, but here comes an A for you. And an E in the middle, an E in the middle. All right, anybody want a note again? Oh, we're feeling okay. And we actually get to see Lucas. Hello, good to see you. All right, cool. With that whole E in the middle thing, I just want to mention I will do that often for younger students as well. If that's not going very well, then I often give two E's. I play the high E for violins, and then I play a much lower E for basses for young students who are still struggling with those multiple octaves of difference there between those notes. All right. So chapter 3, actually, sorry, no. Before we go into chapter 3, I wanted us to talk for a minute about F naturals and C naturals. Many of you have already started to do those on these instruments just because you're learning more about string instruments, but just to confirm fingerings for everybody. So I am... Let's just do some echo patterns first to just get the notes in our ears, and then I'll confirm for you which finger you should be using. But first, let's focus on your ears. So I'm starting on open D, and if you'll just echo back what I play. All right, so hopefully all my violins and violas have a 1-2 finger pattern going on right now where your 2 is really, really close to your 1. You slid it back for that F natural. My basses should all be on a 2 on the D string. Basses are using a 2 to get that F natural, and my cellos are also using a 2 to get that F natural on your D string. Cellos are using a 2. Let's just do a couple more, all using F natural, to just make sure you're using that correct finger and matching pitches as best you can. Sorry. All right, in my brain, you all sound perfect, right? Anybody have questions, concerns about being able to match those notes accurately? All right, and then let's do just a couple. I won't do quite as many on the A string. So if violin, viola, cello could join me on A, okay, and we're focused on C sharp versus C natural. Basses, to give you a little bit of a challenge. Now let's have the basses also go to their A string. So we're all, of course, going to go up in string. Basses are going to go down if you would start on open A basses, okay? All right, everybody's starting on open A. Echo a couple more with me, please. So violins, violas again are that 1-2 finger pattern where your 2 is back really close to 1. Cellos and basses should both be on a 2 for that C natural, yes, natural. Basses, I think Gabe, and I don't remember if Dominique ever did, shifting just a little bit, which is fine if you're just kind of looking for the practice. Hopefully you know you don't have to shift, but if you're wanting to shift, that's perfectly fine to do. So basses on A, open A, B, C natural, C sharp, right? A 4 is C sharp. And then you could go to open D there for that, okay? So basses, and a C natural on the A string is a 2. And cello, same thing on your A string, A, B, C natural, C sharp, D for the cellos there. Questions, comments, concerns about F natural, C natural? Cool, let's see if we can handle a C major scale. I'm sure we can. Could my violins, violas start on the G string with a 3? Violas, I'm not going to let you start on open C because that's too easy, right? I want you to practice these low 2 finger patterns. So violins, violas are a 3 on the G string. Cellos are a 4 on the G string. Same thing, you don't get to start on open C. Okay, a 4 on the G string. And basses, if you'll start that 2 on A. 2 on A. Basses, when you get up to the G string, maybe you've already thought through this, when you hit G, you're going to go G, A, B, and then you still need the C natural. If you would like to just slide up with your 4, and it is an actual shift, like take all your fingers, don't try to just stretch because you'll hurt yourself, right? So you do need to shift up, but you can move your 4 up to hit that C natural. Or basses, if you would like to truly shift to 3rd position and use your 1 because you've gotten comfortable with where that lives, that's fine also. But you will have to shift to hit that C natural at the top and then back down for B, A, G. All right, let's give it a try. We'll see how it goes. sounding like this. 1, 2, C major, go. Back down. Hey, what I could see looked good. I so wish I could hear you all, right? Questions, comments, concerns about fingerings for that C major scale? Alrighty, good stuff. So now I'm going to look into chapter 3. If you would like to join me at all on page 78, feel free, but you don't have to. I will point out, mostly as a reminder for you that this is in this book if you haven't looked at it in a while. The beginning of each of these beginning, intermediate, and advanced chapters starts with these lists. So it gives you a whole list of, these are the bowing skills that we should be working on at the intermediate level. These are the instrument position and left hand skills we should be working on. Music reading skills, oral skills, and improvisation skills, all laid out for you at, roughly the intermediate level. This is what your students should be working on. And that's part of why I like this book, because I feel like they give you not only good strategies, but also here are the goals and objectives that you should be meeting at this level. So one of the things that you're wanting to work on is teaching parallel bowing, making sure that bow stays parallel to the bridge, and some activities related to that. And darn it, I forgot to grab another clip. Sorry, give me half a second. Hold that thought. All right. So one of the strategies that it mentions on page 81 is bowing with clips. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. I think I'll do it this way. You can use actual clothespins if you happen to have some of those around, or you can also use binder clips like this. These can be a little bit harder on the bow, so just making sure that they don't clip too tightly and damage the bow is an important thing to pay attention to. But one kind of nice thing about these is it is pretty easy to clip it. Yeah, pretty easy, I said, right? Or not. To clip it. Sometimes I can get it to work where I can clip it and then flip the silver part down. And it kind of works with the clothespin too, but I don't really want to squish up the hair too badly. The whole point of this, you can maybe already see, is to help your students pay attention to where they are in the bow if you're trying to get them to always be in the middle of the bow. Or maybe I even want them to always be in the lower third of the bow. Whether it provides an actual physical barrier or is just a very clear visual barrier, it helps them really see where they are in the bow as you're trying to work on those skills. Lots of teachers will also just put a piece of colored tape around the bow, and for some students that's plenty of a visual reminder to remind them where they are, but sometimes they just need something a little bigger to say, hey, you should be in this part of the bow. I'm certain you all don't have clothespins right there with you, but can you kind of visualize with me having clothespins? Let's say we want to work on being in the middle of the bow. Okay, so I've got my clothespins on there to be roughly in the middle of the bow, and let's play that C major scale again. I'm going to give myself just a little more bow than that. Let's do C major again, just a smidge faster, and really focused on trying to stay in the middle of the bow as best you can the whole way through. Okay, let's go. Same deal with playing each note twice, up and all the way down, but we'll go a little bit faster. 1, 2, ready, go. right. Most of you looked good staying in the middle of the bow. A few of you, as I looked, were creeping one direction or another a little bit, but that's why you might use this strategy, right? Using some clothespins or something else to help you keep track of where you are. Okay, then I had marked this one you can do. This one doesn't require any extra toys. So on page 82, talking about tone production at different dynamic levels, right? Trying to get our tone to be strong and consistent, but at all different dynamic levels. So thinking about your down bow and your up bow being the exact same tone, which is a tricky thing to do. You've got this giant weight down here at this end of the bow. It's hard to keep it consistent the whole way through. So can you just pick an open string, your favorite open string, and practice going down and up a couple times and really listen to your tone. And if it's not consistent and beautiful, pick one variable to change at a time. So change your contact point, change the amount of weight you're using, see if you can get it to be really beautiful and consistent. I'm seeing what look like some very nice smooth bow strokes. Anybody have questions or concerns about how your tone sounds? Dee Dee?
Well, I don't really have a concern about how it sounds, but I'm wondering like why is it so difficult to get all the way to the tip of the bow, and like do upper strings actually play all the way at the tip of the bow, or like is it okay to have like 2 inches left over?
We do go all the way to the tip of the bow. It might just be your arm length, but it could also, especially coming from a cello background, have to do with your shoulder placement and where your right shoulder is. So if you're having trouble getting all the way to the tip, you might need to bring your shoulder back a little bit, or forward a little bit. Honestly, most students I've worked with need to pull it back some, because if it's too far forward, they run out of wrist and arm and they need to come back a little bit. But I would watch that where your shoulder is. See, you're all the way at the tip right now. Did you moved your shoulder back a little bit? Yeah. So I would think about that shoulder placement just a little bit. It's not like we're out there a whole ton of the time, but there are times when we want to be all the way at the tip. I most often probably with tremolo. You know, getting a really effective tremolo requires usually being out at tip or at least upper third of the bow. So yeah, I'd watch that shoulder probably. Okay. Good. The one other thing I saw, Gabe, I was going to comment on, this might just be fatigue, but your right hand looked like it was starting to kind of collapse down on the bow a little bit. Yeah. So as long as you're aware of that and thinking about if you're in front of students, always trying to give the best model you can with not letting your hand collapse down into that pinky. Okay. You're already thinking about it. All right. Next one I was going to jump to. Oh, was there a question?
Dr. Falter, yeah, I had a question about the hand fatigue actually, because I was having a lot of trouble with that for our last assignment, and I was only able to get like 1 or 2 recordings before my hand just like gave out. So like how do you prevent that? Is it just like you have to just keep practicing to build up the muscles, or because string bass is really hard? with the
It
weight and
is,
stuff.
it is. And I wish I had a magic wand answer for you, Audrey, but it really is just small amounts of practice regularly. It's stamina, just like it would be on any other instrument. Those bows are so heavy, and it's probably a very different muscle position than your right hand is used to being in. And so really the best way to combat it is small amounts of practice every day to be able to build up those muscles and just build up that stamina in that hand. And when you're trying to cram in a whole bunch of recordings in a row, it's very easy to see how your hand can get tired, and that doesn't work well. So I know that's not always a helpful solution for this stage of life for you all, because you may or may not be able to practice your bass every single day. But long term, that really is the best solution there. Good question.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just want to make sure I wasn't doing anything wrong.
Probably not. If you wanted to have just a real brief session together, we could double check that you're not doing anything wrong, because that's a possibility. But most likely, it's just that you're needing to practice a little bit more, and you just don't have time right now. All right, moving to the next
Dr.
one.
Fulcher, I
Yeah,
had
go
a
for it.
quick question about the placement, that placement exercise you just had us do. So, of course, we experimented. I found the best place to get my best sound, and then I started questioning, okay, where's the best place for changing dynamics, trying to get the softest, like, pianissimo that I could get. Does that impact it, and how much does that impact it, would you say?
Yeah. Definitely what dynamic you're looking for is going to impact everything about your tone, right? And where you need to be in your tone. So when we're talking dynamics, things that we can change are the weight or speed that we're using with our right hand, right? And then we can also change the placement bridge to fingerboard. So being closer to the fingerboard is going to be softer, and being closer to the bridge is going to be louder. So it's balancing any number of those variables and finding the best combination for a smooth, consistent pianissimo, but the smoothest, most consistent tone at pianissimo with those variables. Did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I think I was kind of starting to find out. I just wanted to double check with you before we moved on.
Yeah. Good question and observation. Cool. Alrighty, we got time for one or two more here. If you'll bring your instrument back up. So for this one, I'm going to have you set your bow actually on your bridge. If you can set it on your bridge. Basses, that may not be physically possible for you. And so basses, if you can just set your bow towards your bridge, kind of as low as you can comfortably reach. Basses, don't strain your right arm, but go as close to the bridge as you can comfortably reach. Basses. Okay, so everybody, if you would set your bow on your bridge, on your lowest string. Yeah, lovely. You all did that perfectly. You just rocked right over. Then rock one notch to your next highest string, and then to your next highest, and to your highest string. Okay, good. Go backwards. So one lower, and lowest. Now can you do two strings at a time? So your two lowest, and now only one, your second from lowest. Now do the next two, and now only one, and now your highest two, and your very highest. Okay, so I'm gonna click as if I was a metronome. And if you would rock through every one of those, including the double stops, including the two strings at a time. So let's start at the highest and we'll go down to lowest. So on each click, you're going to go from highest string to two strings to one string to two strings to one string to two strings to one string. Okay. 1, 2. And hopefully we all made it. All right. And of course, you could do that with a much more motivating drum beat in the background instead of just you clicking. So that's one of those things, trying to help with string crossings, right? And helping your students feel where their right arm is going to need to be for every string that they're on. And particularly as you start working on harder and harder music that's faster and has more and more string crossings in it, they need to be able to move from string to string very quickly and have that right arm just have the muscle memory to know where it needs to be for each of those strings. So it doesn't work quite as smoothly for basses, but for everybody else, actually using the bridge as as a way to feel that rocking back and forth can be a good starting point for some of that. Okay. All right. Well, I hate that we didn't get to shifting today, but that is okay. Shifting and cello extensions were on my list for today, but we'll just have to get to those next time, / maybe I'll add a couple videos to your stuff for Wednesday to be thinking about that, but we will definitely come back to those as a group as well. Wednesday is asynchronous. Next week, I see you both days for your score presentations. If anybody has questions, feel free to stick around. Otherwise, I hope you have a lovely day, everybody. Great to see you.